Welcome back. We're going to be looking at Civil 3D again, exploring some new concepts. One is going to be the alignment concept, and alignments are very powerful, and we're going to be utilizing those probably the rest of the semester as we're working. So what you need to do, if you haven't already, print out your three documents. The first two documents are going to be very important. The first one has geometry and points associated with it, and the second one has point numbers, and the third one is basically showing a kind of finished drawing concept. Would give you a little bit of an idea what highway plans look like as we go into this. So what we're going to do is begin a new drawing. If you're not already there, I'm going to do a start drawing and grab my civil template. Should bring me into this level. First thing we want to do is do our settings. Remember, if you're using the Imperial template, it doesn't have the proper settings that we want to deal with, particularly for angles. So what we're going to do is go over here to Settings, Drawing, Edit the Settings, and remember under Units I can actually set my foot to US Survey foot depending on what I'm working with. I'm going to go ahead and set mine up. It's not going to impact us, and also this isn't going to impact us, remember, other than labeling. Ambient settings, the real one that's important here is our angle. We need to get our angle set up. So I'm going to go to Angle, under decimal degree, grab my degree minute second so that I can be in an angle input. Go ahead and OK that, and that should take care of that. So we're ready to begin a drawing at this point. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our points, and we have three control points that are given, point 1, 2, and 5. So what I'm going to do is go here to my points menu. Under my miscellaneous points creation, I'm going to do a northing and easting. Remember, your points panel here, your create panel is going to show up, your little toolbar. I'm going to open this guy here, and I want to set up a few things today. So what we're going to have is creation. You might recall from last time, no elevation is going to be utilized in this. I'm going to go elevations, set that to none. Not going to worry about anything else in that piece of it. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. The only other thing I want to deal with is point identity. And I want to set that to false because I'm going to be kind of working all over the place with my point numbering. So I'm going to close that and get that kind of out of my way. If you got space, you can take it out of your screen. But we should still be prompted for northing. So what we're going to do is enter point 1, giving it the proper northing and easting. Point number is 1. And I'm going to go ahead and call this control. Point 2. And control again. And then point 5, which, be careful with the coordinates. We're going to call this 5 and control. When you're done, go ahead and hit the escape key twice, and then a zoom and extents. And you should see your 3 points, one here, one up here, one here, and notice they don't have their labeling. So under the prospector, we'll notice we now have created points, points group, we have our all points. So what we're going to do is go and look at the properties of that. And under this we have a basic style, which is fine. Let's go ahead and we can set this up to give us point numbers and descriptions if you like. Points and descriptions, go ahead and apply that, and you should see all of your information now relevant to that. The other thing we want to do is check our points. So we're going to do an edit points and open up the panorama. If your panorama comes into a different location, just float it down and make sure that your coordinates are correct. Also make sure that you're not looking easting northing. Most people are working northing easting, so be aware of that. If you do find a mistake in here, all you have to do is click in the relevant box and should be allow you to make the change. So check that and make sure that's good. Okay, so what we're going to now do is add some line work. We did this last week, and remember we talked about different methods. Probably the easiest method is to just go ahead and generate line from points. So I'm going to come up here to the draw panel, create lines by point object, select point object 1, point object 2, get my line, hit escape twice. So if you've noticed on our first sheet, what we've done is attached the line from 1 to 2. We have stations information on there. Right now it's just control. We're going to do the same thing from point 5, and notice we have a bearing, north 35 east, but no distance information. Well, what we're going to be dealing with here is an alignment that showing you that a township road 35 exists and an intersection occurs further up here, but it's coming in at a very acute angle, which is not a good intersection. So what we're going to do is realign this thing with a curve and then bring it in over here with a perpendicular type of intersection. So that's going to give us a much better location for intersection and better horizontal geometry and horizontal sight distance. So what we're going to do is create a line from point 5 using the bearing. Distance is immaterial, so we're just going to kind of drag that out. But what I'm going to do is come up here, create a line by bearing, since I know that information. But now notice it's prompting me for first point, and that's really looking for an O-snap. So over here I can come and grab an O-snap for point name, point number, or point object. So I'm just going to grab my point object O-snap, select it, hit the escape key, and notice what I'm doing now is in a bearing mode. So my quadrant, remember from last week, first quadrant is 1. Bearing is going to be 35 degrees. Don't worry about minutes and seconds if they're zeros. And the distance is, like I said, immaterial. I'm just going to drag this guy up about 300 feet and left click it and then hit escape twice. And so what I'm doing is showing it the distance. I could also type in a distance, but in either case it's really just as easy. So let's do a zoom extents and look at what we've got. We have this control line established at 35 degrees northeast, and we have this one established between our control points. So what we're going to do is go ahead and create a control layer for our group for our points, because we really don't need to see those guys eventually. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here, create a new group. I'm going to call this my control. Instead of using a basic style, I'm going to use one called station. And I'm just going to have it give me a point number because I really know that it's control. So I'm going to just say, let's just give a point number on that, but let's include only the points that have that description. So I'm going to use control, apply that, check your under your point list. Let's see what we've got. Make sure that you get your 3 points in there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and OK that. You might notice also that the points have now changed look. They no longer have their label for description, and they have changed a point style. So, and notice over here, of course, we have now a control group, and he's writing on top. Okay, so what we're going to now do is establish the intersection. And the intersection occurs 200 feet up from point 1. That's been located by an engineer or somebody in the field that says, hey, this is a great location for the new alignment location. Now, of course, something else that would have to be considered in this would be who owns this property that you're going to be cutting through. So that might also require right-of-way takes and things like that. So we're not worried about that at this point. We're just going to say, okay, we're going to come up 200 feet along this line. So you can do it several different methods. What I'm going to do is drop a point down. And if you go to the second sheet, you'll see that that point actually is called point 3. So we're going to come up here over to points, and under our miscellaneous tools we have one that's called along a line, and that's really nice because I can specify an endpoint and just drop it along a line, or I can do on a line also, but you got to be careful, that just puts it at endpoints. So what this does is allows me to basically give a distance or a station, if you will, along it. So what I'm going to do is select it. Now I want to select it close to the point where I'm measuring from. So in this case it's near 1. Notice my little glyph that yellow X that shows up, and that's showing me, hey, you're sitting at that point. That's good. So I could actually just show it a distance by dragging, but I want to be specific, so I'm going to type in 200. It wants to know point number, so we're going to call that 3. And let's call this intersection. And that's our intersection point. Hit the escape key twice, and you should now see your point coming up there. Okay. So what we now need to do is establish the intersection line coming into this. So we know the location, but we need to bring a line coming in this way, and eventually we want to intersect that line with this. So we're going to do that in a very easy method, utilizing just some straight AutoCAD commands. Now I could do a couple things like snap a line out here and snap it in perp, but what I can do is actually set up on 3, backside 2, turn a 90-degree angle, and go out any distance, because again, the distance is going to be an immaterial thing. So I'm going to go ahead, go into lines, and they have a nice routine in here that is called line by angle. And when it wants me to specify first point, what I need to do is give it a point. So again, it's looking for an O-snap, and what I'm going to do is O-snap it by using a point object. So I'm going to select the point that I'm occupying first, the point that I'm backsighting second, and notice I get this symbol. So that's showing me again instrument setup, backsight, green, magenta is the foresight. So I need to tell it an angle. This is a 90-degree intersection. I could either use positive 270 or negative 90. I'm going to go ahead and tell it negative 90. And the distance, again, I don't really care, so I'm just going to drag it past that and then hit the escape key twice. So there's my line, and what I've done is I've forced this to set up at 3, backsight 2, and turn it off. I could equally do the same thing using just line options, and there's a lot of different ways you can handle this. So that's just utilizing some of Civil 3D tools. So what we're going to do is just trim this off, and we could use an AutoCAD trim, but I find that fillet's a lot easier. I'm just going to type in an F, hit enter, generates the fillet command. Check your radius, R, enter, 0. Always set it to 0 because you never really know if it's truly at 0, so you might get a little arc if you don't. And I'm going to pick this guy and this guy, and notice it's gone. So I've trimmed it off, and I have a nice sharp intersection which generates or represents for me my PI of my curve. So I do want to place a point at that location so that I do have working points later on if I need them. That way if I lose my line work, I can reconstruct things via my point information. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and create a point. And we're going to do what's called a manual point. We're just going to simply O-snap to that. So if you click it down here and you get an O-snap indicator, you're good to go. If not, you can hit a shift right click. So I can hit a shift right click, grab my O-snaps, so I can grab whatever I want. Grab that guy, left click it. Should ask you for point number. We're going to call that 4, and then PI for the descriptor. And you should notice now that we've got that, hit the escape key. So we really now have everything we need in place to be able to establish this. When we go back to the first sheet, notice the designer has given us parameters to design this curve with. Now one is actually delta, and if you think about it, that's what this tangent line and this tangent line represent. These are your delta angles, okay, between those two. The other parameter you see is the degree curve, and we're assuming it's highway, so that would be a 30-degree curve. 30 degrees means you don't have a really high velocity on this thing, so it's going to give you a smaller radius, so you're not traveling at 60 miles per hour around this curve. We're going to establish it, and we got several different ways. You could use the AutoCAD fillet command, but if you did a fillet command, it would force you to calculate the radius yourself. And then of course you have rounding issues, because if you notice you've got 30 degrees, so you know that your radius is going to be at a 4 or 5 or 6 decimal place value if you really want to get it exact. Civil 3D has lots of routines, and we're going to be looking at them, but over in this draw area they've got some pretty neat ones, and the one is this guy called curves. When we open this up, you'll notice you've got a lot of different ways you can handle curves. One is create curves between two tangents, or create curves onto tangents. And the only difference is the one will trim and the one will not. So if we look at, let's see, for this one, for instance, it creates it, but it leaves your tangent lines intact. So if I would select that, I just select my first tangent, my second tangent, and it gives me parameters. And notice I've got tangent, external, degree of curve, chord length, different values. So let's say, for instance, I knew my radius, and I could just tell it 200 feet, and it puts it in. Notice it puts a curve in here, but it leaves the tangents intact. Okay, so we're going to delete that. Select it, delete it. I want it delete for me. Okay, so I'm going to use the other option. What I want to do is actually create a curve between two lines. So I'm going to select in, tangent out, and again, notice I have a lot of options here. So this is kind of like the fillet command, except it has a lot more options than fillet would give you. What I'm going to do is go to degree of curve, because that's what I know, and it'll further prompt me for, well, is this a chord or is this an arc definition? Well, this is an arc definition, so I'm going to hit 30 degrees, and it placed in my curve. So now what we notice is we have our alignment set up. Now, these are just objects in AutoCAD. They are actually just a line, an arc, and a line object. And so we want to eventually turn those into a smarter object in Civil 3D. One of the things that we will be looking at, though, is just seeing what information we have on this. Now, if you do a list command in AutoCAD and just type in list and select your object, you'll get a list out of that information, and hit enter. You might have to, okay, opened up. Notice your line is spitting out X and Y information, X, Y, Z actually, the length of the line, but the angle's reading out, not in bearings. So this isn't a very friendly list out. So Civil 3D has, under the Analyze tab, they have a way of selecting information, and one is this thing called the Inquiry tool, which we'll use a little bit later, or we have this thing which is a really cool tool, your Line Arc Information tool. So I'm going to select that, and I just select my line, and you may have to F2 to open up your screen, but you'll notice everything's still listing out in XY, which I'm still not sure why Civil's doing this, but here's the important information down here. You see the distance, and you see the course, which is expressed in bearings, and of course that's due to your setup. So if we go to the curve, now we get a whole lot more information, and again, open that up by F2, and notice what you get here is your tangent information, your arc length, your chord, bearing and distance, radius, and delta. Notice the one thing that this does not know anything about is whether this curve is a degree of curve, chord, or arc. So you really have to set that up in the beginning, because what's driving that information is based on this radius. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and close that. So escape out of there, and that's going to be a really convenient tool for you to be able to check with stuff. So later on we're going to be able to use this inquiry tool, but it's going to be based on different types of object types. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later. So let's go back to the Home tab, and what we're going to do is now string this stuff together. We want to make this a one object and a new object type called an alignment. And an alignment is very similar to a polyline if you think about it, in the sense that this will be constructed as one object once we get done with it, but it will have more intelligence. So it will know a lot more about itself than, say, just a straight polyline. So it has extended data on it, if you will. It will also be driven from a look standpoint by styles. One will be the style of how this thing looks, the line type and color, layer, and the other thing will be labeling styles, and that both gets a little bit tough after we get into this for a while. So let's go ahead, we're going to create an alignment, and to do that, again, make sure you're at the Home tab. Under the Create Design panel, there's a lot of good stuff in here. We're going to start to utilize this. This first one that we're going to look at is the alignment section. So we're going to pull this down, and there's many different ways to create alignments in here, and notice you can create them using tools. So you could be drawing that from scratch essentially, or you can best fit through objects or points, create from existing objects, create from what we call corridors, which we'll be looking at later on, and so on and on and on. What we're going to do is the easiest method I found is to use this create alignment from objects. Now, this does require you to have your objects in place, and they also have to be endpoint to endpoint objects. Um, it's not necessary for you to have your curves in place, but you do have to have, if you have tangents, and they do have to be endpoint to endpoint. If they're not exactly endpoint to endpoint, this will fail at the point where the endpoints don't touch. So um, by the virtue of the way that we created this, we know that we are in good shape with endpoint to endpoint. So I'm going to go into create alignment from objects. It wants me to select my objects. Now I can do it in any method. I usually start out with the first object, and then the rest of them could just be selected any method. So I'm going to go ahead and window that. Once you're done, go ahead and hit enter. You should see little arrows that are indicating the direction of flow, if you will. And we are going to be going from 5 as a lower station to 3 as an upper station. So they should be going 5 to 3. If they're good, you hit enter. If not, you type in reverse. So what we're going to do is go ahead and enter. Unless you need to reverse it. And it'll bring you to the create alignment from objects box. So in here, what we're going to do is give it a name. And I'm going to call this thing Township, just TWP 35. The type of object it's going to be, or alignment rather, will be what's called a center line. So you notice we have different types. We're going to use a center line type. The description might be, this could be a proposed realignment. You don't have to put anything in here. I'm going to go ahead and just have it in there today. And leave it at that. Now, this is one I always forget, and I do this quite often. I laugh because it's really it happens. So starting station, instead of 0, if you notice on our first sheet, that should actually be 52 12 62. So also when you enter this, do not put the plus. You're entering it as if it's a distance. Site is something else we can attach this to, so you could have several sites, and those are really good for more subdivision work. Right now we're going to leave that to none, so we don't have to worry about that. This will be a proposed alignment. Notice they do have different types of styles. So this is going to drive how it looks, definitely. So I'm going to call that proposed. Label style, and a lot of different label styles. We're going to use just a very simple, what's called a major, minor, and geometry points. Do not add curves. The curve already exists. Now you also have the ability to turn these entities or objects into an alignment, or you can leave them intact and basically draw one on top. So what I'm going to do, by toggling that, I'm going to erase them. And if you want to leave them for some reason, then it's probably toggle that off. But if you're good without them, take it out. Let's look at design criteria. This is a 60 mile per hour design speed. Let's say that this is just a 30, just to have that. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to OK this, and you should now see your alignment in place. And what you should notice is that you now have an alignment. This is your actual alignment. This is a label. Notice they're separate, but when you click on one, you kind of get the other. But these are separate things that can be manipulated. That's also a part of your label. Okay. So what we have now is a very intelligent type of object, and this knows a lot about itself. In fact, if you just let your cursor sit there, you'll notice that you're getting the location. It tells you what alignment you're talking about, what station you're at, and notice your offset. As that changes, it actually even calculates it. So it's looking at with the position of the cursor with respect to that. Okay. So let's create another alignment. We're going to come over here and make this guy into an alignment. So we do the same thing. This is a very simple alignment. Select it near that endpoint and hit enter. If, again, that needs to be reversed, reverse it. If not, just go ahead and hit enter. Instead of calling this Township 35 again, we're going to call this State Route SR 247. This is a centerline type. Station is at 12 or 112, 8360. I always forget to do this, and this can be added later, but it can create problems, so it's better to try to catch it initially. No site, not a proposed this time. This is actually an existing road. And again, I'm going to use this same major, minor. I'm not going to add curves, which it can't anyway, but I'll just toggle it off. Go ahead and OK that. And now you see that. And you notice the only really difference in the look is the alignment look here. It's red on different, probably on a different layer. Maybe on the same layer, but it's a different color scheme. But it's using the same label style exactly. Okay. So Notice it does tell us some nice things that we have. Beginning points, ending points. This stuff can also be pulled out, so if you don't like the way this looks, labels are kind of interesting. I can click, they have little grips that allow them to come out, and then the style is set up so that it will give you a leader. So this is actually like a multi-leader in AutoCAD. So I'm going to pull that guy out, and I'm going to pull this guy out so it gets a little bit out of our way, kind of like this. And I might not want that one like that, so I'm going to pull that out. And you might want to do the same thing up here just so you kind of have those out of your way, but you can read them. Okay, so we're there good with that. So at this point, it might be a good idea. I'm going to zoom extent so we can see our whole project. I'm going to go ahead and save it. You guys might want to too. That way if you crash, you're going to have it somewhere. So I'm just going to save it. We're going to call this lab 1. And I have a folder that I'm going to just dump mine in. Actually, I got a lab 1 in there already, so I'm going to call it lab 1A, just to differentiate. Okay, so periodically you should be saving. Good idea. Once you've established a name, you can just come up here and just click that real quick anytime you're quick save.